Recording. Yeah, I got it right. It should be. It's just a phenomenal job. I'd love to buy it. Please, do your price.
All right, everyone, I'm back and I have my coffee. And off on the side is Krista. She's here. She doesn't want to be in the screen, which is understandable. And I think Shango is going to join too. She came into town today. So, getting ready for the High Desert Human Design Conference. All right, I guess it's kind of a small class today. I know it was at a different time. And thank you all for being so accommodating about last week and the surprise cancellation. I just ended up not getting out of Black Rock City on the day that I thought I would. So this is a cup that was gifted, my generator cup, gifted by Elena Mann. Thanks, Elena, for that. Well, I saved a couple of really fun topics for our last two classes. This is our penultimate class, and then tomorrow is our last one. And I saved. There's if you want to grab her. There's Shango.
Yeah, I was gonna go around, but
Great. Yeah, either way, whichever works.
I'll just grab it this way.
Yeah. So I saved a couple of fun topics. So tomorrow we're going to be looking at my own original research into lines. I'm calling these two classes New Perspectives, and the idea is we're going to be looking at different perspectives, not necessarily from the teachings of Ra, as were the other classes. These two will be looking at kind of alternate ways of thinking about the lines, alternate ways of approaching the lines, and just new developments in the study of lines. So today we're going to be looking at the work of Steve Rhodes, the BaanTu system. And for those who don't know, you can go on BaanTu.com, and that is his website. And just a moment here. I'm going to pull up the presentation for today. Great. So we'll be looking at the work of Steve Rhodes, and this is based on his own original research. He knew Ra, and he actually wrote a biography of Ra and interviewed Ra's family and things like that. And I highly recommend his Prophecy of Ra Uru Hu. It's a great description of Ra's experience with the voice. And although he spells it differently, BaanTu is a reference to what Ra learned in his encounter with the voice. He basically learned at the Big Bang, there was a primary or a prime personality crystal and a prime design crystal. And they called the two. The Ban, as Ra spelled it, was BHAN, and the two was TUGH. But it is the same BaanTu that Steve Rhodes is referring to. And he calls his system the BaanTu system because essentially Steve Rhodes felt that the information that Ra received in his encounter with the voice was not only limited to Ra's interpretation in the human design system. It actually is part of the commonwealth of what all of us as humans should have access to and should be able to study on our own. And so Steve Rhodes really developed his own understanding that he calls the BaanTu system. And if you go BaanTu.com, you can create your BaanTu chart and you can see what he has to say about it and so on. And he has some very interesting approaches. For one thing, he doesn't talk about strategy and authority. He also doesn't talk about type. He doesn't observe the difference in projectors and manifestors and generators. For this reason, he's quite a controversial figure in human design circles, perhaps even more than Richard Rudd and Gene Keys, which is the other major offshoot of the human design knowledge. But in any case, I found a lot of value in it. I really enjoy it, and I hope you'll learn something too and kind of get some enjoyment out of it as well. It's an interesting approach. One thing that Steve Rhodes does when he approaches the human design knowledge is he's much less opinionated. I mean, it kind of makes sense. He has innocence motivation himself, being a 6/3. And so he doesn't really see transference as a problem, for instance. He sees it as a primary and secondary preference. So when he talks about the transference of motivation or view or any of these things, he just says, oh, they prefer this, but they also spend some of their time in that. So I'm a desire person. He would say, that's my preference, and then my transference to innocence would be my secondary preference. And that's very different from Ra's approach, which is quite strict and says, well, desire is my true self and innocence is my not self in some sense. Steve Rhodes doesn't use the term not self. He has a different approach to it. And he also sees the greatest value in the human design knowledge as having to do with relationship. and how we relate to each other. And he has some very interesting original research in that department. And I agree with most of what he says. I mean, he has some pretty profound insights into relationship. It can be packaged in a way that rubs some people the wrong way. He calls himself the relationship wizard. And that's a little bit, Steve Rhodes, the relationship wizard. He's going to tell you about relationship. But I actually really like what he says. He says, love is a matter of the magnetic monopole in the G center. That love is not the same thing as compatibility. And when people are asking, I mean, like those apps, CoStar or the pattern, or the kind of classic thing of when you start to date somebody and then you want to look at their chart and see if you're compatible. He basically says no chart will ever tell you anything about love. All the chart tells you is compatibility. And he describes compatibility in a really great way. He says it's how much time you can spend with someone. I really like that the more time you spend with someone, the incompatibilities basically make you spend time apart. You have to spend time alone. You can't, it's like holding your breath. You can't hold your breath forever. You eventually, no matter how compatible you are with somebody, you'll need to spend time alone. And even if you're incredibly compatible with them, you can't spend an infinite amount of time in or with someone else. I mean, ideally, you spend every night alone when you go back to your own bed to sleep out of aura. But I like this idea that you can love someone and they can be your fractal neighbor. They can be, we could even say, your twin flame, which, by the way, was a term coined by Plato, and it meant that the souls used to be part of the same soul that broke into two, which, as I interpret that, we used to be part of the same crystals of consciousness, the Baan and the Tu. And when the crystals shattered in the Big Bang into all of the personality and design crystals, there was a personality crystal right next to ours. And that is what we call the twin flame. And so you can have your twin flame, but in this lifetime, you might not be very compatible with them, and you can't stand being around them for more than a couple hours at a time or more than a couple days at a stretch. And that's okay. And so what he looks at for compatibility, he looks at who you are, which is the personality and design sun earth. And then he looks at what you're drawn to, the personality and design nodes. And this is a very interesting interpretation of the nodes. The nodes are multivalent, very many different qualities of the nodes. But the way Steve Rhodes looks at them is that they're what we like in others. And I would also add to that the nodes are not only what we like in others, but they're qualities that we may mistakenly strive to emulate ourselves. That is to say, I might try to be more like my nodes, striving to be more like the nodes, striving to embody the characteristics of the tone, color, and line of my nodes. When really it just means I'm drawn to people who have those characteristics. And that part of living my design is no longer striving to be other than who I am and other than what I am, but is actually embracing the fact that I am one way and I'm drawn to people who are another way. So I might be fragile and drawn to very resilient people, or I might be reactive and drawn to very unreactive people, or I might be success-driven but drawn to hedonists who don't care about success, and so on. And we'll go into these nuances. And it's actually very freeing to differentiate between the sun, earth, and the nodes. And I find Steve Rhodes' explanation so clear, because when you get into the nodes in human design, I mean, it can be a real morass. It can be quite difficult to understand and interpret them. I know in our first couple of weeks of class, we discussed the nodes, and it was quite complex. Steve Rhodes makes it much more simple. The sun, earth is you. The nodes are what you're drawn to in others. The being versus the seeing, as Ra would put it. So before we look at Steve Rhodes, I want to just introduce how Ra approached tone, color, and line. And this is somewhat advanced, so don't worry if it's confusing at all. I'm happy even to follow up on email or post-class after the conference and so on, because this is a very interesting area of human design analysis. And Ra calls it TCL analysis. And this is on the personality side. We're only looking at the personality here. I'll discuss the differences in personality and design later, but we're just looking at personality. Now, at the line level, we have the familiar line keynotes that we've been studying in class. But you can see that there are also color and tone keynotes. And what Ra would do is he would start at the tone, which is kind of backwards. Usually we start at the line, we kind of work our way down. But for TCL analysis, something he developed very late in his career, it was in the 2008 materials, the rave psychology materials. And Ra said we should look to our personality sun earth and start at the tone and do what he calls a TCL chain. So here's my TCL chain. 335. This was also Ra's, by the way. I'm the action, desire, heretic. And what it really means is at the tonal level, my tonal cognition is action-oriented. Action will spring into action. It's from the Ajna binary, and I'll be going into the binaries in a moment, but essentially springing into action. That then fuels my desire, which is my motivation, and it ultimately reaches the surface as the heretic. So it's kind of, what kind of heretic am I? There are innocent heretics, there are guilt-driven heretics, there are need heretics. And then what kind of desire heretic am I? Some desire heretics, the right variable ones, are fueled by acceptance. Some are fueled by judgment, and so on. And these keynotes are very dense and require quite a bit of deconstruction, much beyond the scope of this class today. So I only put this forward as a sort of way that you can explore your own TCL line. And in fact, if you'd like to post yours in the Telegram group or email me privately, I'm more than happy to help analyze that and interpret that for you. Now, this is the personality sun earth. And if the program you're using doesn't have tone and color, you can use humanarchetypes.com, where tone is T, color is C. But you can also find your chart in the shared body graphs folder. All of those have tone, color, and line. Tone is the triangle and color is the hexagon. This is Mike's. Mike is 336. Mike, who co-taught a couple of our classes, Michael Steenbeck-Litvin. And so you can see he has the same action desire, but he's a role model. And so this kind of analysis that Ra did is very, very interesting because it really does show how your cognition works either on the design or the personality side. He was using the personality here because that's, in the context of rave psychology materials, that is our outer authority and what kind of outer authority we're here to give. So I'm here to give practical provisions in times of crisis, and I'm here to do it fueled by my desire and fueled by action and leaping into action. And Mike is here to give his objective perspective as the role model and his sort of view from above, but with the same cognitive underpinnings and cognitive architecture. Now, this part is going to get a little bit complicated, but just bear with me here. When we start at tone, because remember, we're starting all the way down at tone, you can divide tone into halves or thirds. And Ra did both of these. And I'm teaching this because this gives context for how Steve Rhodes developed his system. Ra spent most of his time teaching tone as halves. That's variable, left or right variable. So if you see the arrows in your chart, that signifies you have tone 1, 2, or 3 as left variable, or tone 4, 5, or 6 as right variable. And so Ra spent most of his time, not all of it, he did look at the tonal binaries, he absolutely did. But most of his analysis was, what do tones 1, 2, and 3 have in common? And how is that different from tones 4, 5, and 6? And so in his variable lectures, he has 16 lectures starting with PLL, ending with PRR, and going through every permutation of right and left variable. I am PLL. And what that means is that on my personality side, I have tones 1, 2, or 3 on both positions. On my design side, I have the sun, earth is going to have tones 1, 2, or 3, and the nodes on the design side will have tones 4, 5, or 6. Now, this is just to say that there's a tremendous level of analysis of human design around variable. But what Steve Rhodes does, he didn't look at variable. He decided to go deeper into the tonal binaries, that is to say, the thirds. And you can see this triangle down here. What happens when we look at the binaries? And there's some very interesting things about the binaries. For one, this triangle signifies and has connection to the 3 awareness centers. In fact, the human design body graph is kind of a triangle, isn't it? If you look in the lower left portion of the body graph, that's the spleen. Then you look at the top, that's the ajna. And then you look at the lower right, it's the solar plexus. Those are the 3 awareness centers. And in fact, this is what the tonal binaries are called. The splenic binary for the spleen, the ajna binary, and the solar plexus binary. Now, Ra spent quite a bit of time going into the relation of the tonal binaries to the streams, the stream of taste, the stream of smell, and so on. And he went into them in the context of the streams of the gates, and also in his rave anatomy, he went into the binaries quite a bit in the context of the design side and of the biological processes and the senses. Tone 1 being smell, tone 2 being taste, tone 3, outer vision, tone 4 being inner vision, tone 5 being feeling, and tone 6, touch. And so Ra spent quite a bit of time on the design binaries. What is the binary between feeling and touch? What is the binary between outer and inner vision? What is the binary between smell and taste? But Steve Rhodes goes much further. And in fact, what he does is he generalizes the binaries from tone to color to line. So when we start, we have the binaries of 1 and 2. And Steve Rhodes found some very interesting things when we divide this way. Yeah, we've looked at the tonal binaries in human design, but we don't often look at the color binaries or the line binaries. Sometimes we do. I mean, how we started this whole class, I was looking in binaries, actually. I was saying, what's the difference in the first and the second line? How are they different approaches to the same problem? You can see it as the problem of security. How are we safe? How do we survive? The problem of survival. And then once we've made sure we can survive, how do we deal with the problem of uncertainty about what could possibly change? And that is the second line's task. And as we looked at the difference in the first and the second line, it really is the difference in learning everything we can about the way things are, the first line, versus cultivating the preparation for things to change in a way that we might not be able to predict, the second line. So we can see that these binaries do have validity as a research avenue. It's important to look not just at upper trigram, lower trigram, or to look at the top 3 colors, the bottom 3 colors, or the right variable, the left variable at the tonal level, but to look at binaries. We can see that the 1, 2 have something in common, the 3, 4 have something in common, and the 5, 6 have something in common. Innocence and guilt, I mean, there's a binary. We've seen that in courtrooms, right? And the role model and the heretic being the binary of the 2 transpersonal left angle roles, and the difference between judgment and acceptance, and so on. So what Steve Rhodes found is, and I'll go into these more deeply, and then we'll kind of, I'm going to talk briefly about tone and color, and then we will get to line, and we'll just kind of leave it at line since this is all in the context of line. He found that tones 1 and 2 at a deep level are about success, which is a word that he uses to refer to the spleen, and he means effectively success at the material plane, success financially, success in procreating, success in competition for limited resources. This is success in the material plane in a competitive way. It's not a sort of more modern idea of success where we all win. This is success where there are winners and there are losers, and there's a certain competition over limited resources. At the color level, he calls these people pessimists and says that essentially colors 1 and 2 are fundamentally pessimistic. And it's funny to see and to think of fear and hope. I guess it's easy to think of fear as pessimistic because you might say, well, the fear motivated person is pessimistic. They think something might break, so they try to have a backup on hand. They're afraid it might break, so they're motivated to have extra backups. Or they're afraid they might not know something, so they try to learn as much as they can about it. They're pessimistic about their knowledge in that sense. They're pessimistic that they might not really know as much as they think they do, so they learn more. But it's funny to think of hope as pessimistic. I mean, isn't it the opposite? Don't we think of hope? I'm hoping for a bright future. Doesn't it seem like a certain optimism? Steve Rhodes says no, that in fact, the cognitive motivations of the first and second color are supposed to be pessimistic in the sense that they're limited. They're not just hoping for anything. They're not just assuming it'll work out. It's funny to think of it in that regard, and what the pessimist, the role of the pessimist in the totality, that the pessimist is there to say it could break, or it might not work, or it's not worth hoping for. That hope motivation isn't just about hoping, it's also about knowing what's not worth hoping for, what's hopeless in that sense. And then he calls lines 1 and 2 the reactive lines. And we're going to go into the lines more later. I'm just kind of giving a general overview, but it raises an interesting question immediately, which is, when you have reactive lines, what is the difference in reaction and response? Because the generator is here to respond. So is it easier for a first or second line to be a generator because they're so reactive that they react strongly to things, so that they're responding in some sense? Or is that different? We can get into this in a moment, but it does raise an interesting line of inquiry. Ra worked on a little known material where he went into the 48 combinations of type and profile. So for each of the 12 profiles, he looked at the generator, the projector, the manifestor, and the reflector. And he wrote about what it's like to be a generator 1-3 versus a projector 1-3 versus a manifestor 1-3 versus a reflector 1-3. And this is 48 total permutations. And he was quite interested in this question. So it is valid. I mean, it's an interesting question. And Ra said, like in all things, there are advantages and disadvantages, and there are certain hierarchies where, for instance, it may be easier to be a 5-1 manifestor than a 5-1 generator, or it may be easier to be a 1-3 generator than a 1-3 manifestor. And I believe that Steve Rhodes' research into line gives us some clues here, because what he means by reactive is essentially somebody who has a strong reaction to things. And you can see already the continuity between that idea and the idea of the generator, who responds to things, compared to, as we'll see when we look at lines 5 and 6, that they're not reactive, the unreactive lines. And just by the way, this can also help those arguments. I mean, really, a lot of what Steve Rhodes has done is for relationships and increasing self-love and self-acceptance, as well as surrender and acceptance of the other. Because there are those arguments in relationships. I'm a 5-1. The 5th line is an unreactive line. So my personality can seem uncaring. It gets news and it doesn't react. You don't want your generals to be reactive, right? You don't want someone to come to the general and say, General, your troops have been wiped out. Oh my God, get out of here. Run for the exit. You don't want that reactivity. You want the general to be, okay, we have a plan B. Whereas I've been in a relationship with the second line, a 2-4, the natural harmony of the 5-1. And that second line personality is very reactive. It's the most reactive. So bad news comes and it's like the end of the world, catastrophizing. And what I have to remember is that 2 minutes later, good news might arrive and they will react just as strongly back to the positive side of things. But as a fifth line, it can be hard for me to remember that because if I were to react that strongly, it would have to be something seriously wrong. Now, at the same time, I have a first line body. So I'm much more reactive on the design side. And the 2-4 is less reactive on the design side. So you get into some interesting combinations when we look at profile. When we look at tones 3 and 4, Steve Rhodes, this is the Ajna binary. Steve Rhodes describes these as respect seeking. They're no longer seeking success. They're seeking respect, and it's very different. And if you think about the difference between the spleen and the ajna, the spleen is here for survival, and it doesn't really care what anyone thinks. It just wants to succeed in the competition for limited resources. But respect is the ajna, and the ajna very much cares what people think. In fact, humiliation and embarrassment are in the ajna, not just the ego. People talk about getting their feelings hurt and oftentimes talk about the ego center, the heart center. But the ajna center is also a kind of a secondary ego center in that it cares very much about being humiliated. And that's where we get the not self theme of the ajna, of pretending to be certain, not wanting to show people that you don't know something, not wanting others to think you were tricked or fooled. How could they believe that? What an idiot. It's very careful to pretend it's certain about things, the undefined ajna, as a way of mitigating this fear of embarrassment. So you can see that the ajna does make sense that it cares about respect. It cares what people think. It wants to be respectable and respectful and so on. And then colors 3 and 4, we have the realist. And it's interesting also that the ajna is kind of our center for realism. It's our center to tell us what's real and what isn't. The spleen can be pessimistic and have outrageously pessimistic fears where it's more cautious than necessary. The ajna is here to say, yes, spleen, it seems really scary driving on this freeway by the cliff, but don't worry, we're in control. The ajna is here to be more of the realist and kind of calm down the pessimistic spleen. And then when we get to the solar plexus, we'll see that it's here to be optimistic, which I find very cute, that the solar plexus is here to say, it's going to be fine. Everything's for the greater good. That's the ultimate with innocence, right? There's no such thing as bad. It's all for the greater good. And then you talk to the pessimists and they say, oh no, it can be pretty bad. But you can see that for the solar plexus, it's very optimistic by saying, well, it's all experience anyway. We learned from that experience and we don't have to repeat it. It's just more experience. We can see at the line level, lines 3 and 4, Steve Rhodes keynotes as the opportunist lines. Now that's funny, we already know the 4th line is the opportunist. So why would the 3rd line also be the opportunist? But we can see that the 3rd line is, in some sense, opportunistic. It's not waiting for the opportunity in the way the 4th line is. It's not waiting to initiate or to jump on that opportunity in some sense, which, again, by the way, the term initiate being associated with manifestors, we can see it's probably easier to be a 4th, 5th, or 6th line manifestor than it is to be a 4th, 5th, or 6th line generator. Because the generators are here to respond which has more connection to the reactivity of the lower lines. Obviously, lines 1 and 2 are the most reactive, but line 3 is the reactive opportunistic, we could say. That the third line bumps into someone and reacts to bumping into them and says, hey, let's join forces for a bit. Let's make the bond. We can always break it later. The third line is sort of the soldier of fortune or the victim of chance or the one who just kind of sees what they bump into, and out of that, an opportunity arises out of the reaction to bumping into somebody. Whereas the fourth line is the opportunist in the sense of waiting for the opportunity and pouncing. Which brings me to the upper lines and the upper tones, the solar plexus binary. Tones 5 and 6 are about feeling. So starting with tones 1 and 2, the success-driven, we then move to tones 3 and 4, the respect-driven, they care what people think. Now we've moved past caring what people think. It's funny, only the ajna cares what people think. Before that is the fight for survival. And after that is hedonistic pleasure and new experiences. And this is what tones 5 and 6 are about. Steve Rhodes simply keynotes them feeling. They want to feel good. Colors 5 and 6 are the highest resilience, and they're optimistic about life. They're optimistic in that guilt is optimistic that it can fix anything that comes along. Innocence is optimistic that no matter how bad it gets, it's all for the greater good. It's the deep knowledge that all that happens is good in some sense. It eliminates the possibility for a bad outcome. Desire is the one that's so concerned with the good or the bad outcome. Innocence says it's all for the greater good. And then we get to the heretic and the role model, and Steve Rhodes calls these the initiating lines. And it's so interesting because we know manifestors initiate. So how is it that the lines have an initiating quality as well? What he really means is unreactive. You don't want your general being so reactive. You don't want your administrator at the Department of Motor Vehicles being so reactive. You come in there and you're missing a piece of paper and they freak out and say, oh my God, you don't want that. You don't want the reaction. And by the way, there are benefits to being reactive or not. It's not that being unreactive is some ideal to be emulated. I mean, this is why I mentioned relationships. When you have a relationship between a fifth or a sixth line and a first or a second line, it can be so helpful. That first or second line will be complaining. I graduated with my degree and you had no reaction at all. I made us dinner for our anniversary and you were completely implacable. You had no reaction. They can be really annoyed that the fifth or sixth line doesn't react. It's like those reaction videos on TikTok or YouTube where you see somebody who finds out the information that they got into college and they're reacting. Well, the fifth or sixth line won't do that. And it can be so helpful to know that they're not reactive. Meanwhile, that fifth or sixth line can be so concerned when they deliver bad news to the first or second line, who then reacts very strongly. And what the fifth or sixth line needs to remember is that the moment that news changes, that first or second line will react just as strongly in the positive direction. So that a strong negative reaction can be counteracted by a strong positive reaction very, very quickly. And the fifth or sixth line might not realize this because for them to react that strongly, it would have to be something very serious. And they might accuse the first and second lines of overreacting. Now, starting with tone, I'm just going to go through them again because we kind of did a brief overview, and then I'll finish on lines and we'll talk a little bit about profile, and then we can open it up to discussion. Tone is what Steve Rhodes calls the mood setter. And this is a profound understanding of tone, much more profound than it might first appear. Because Ra gives us all sorts of wonderful descriptions of tone as the cognitive architecture and so on. But what Ra doesn't do is describe its relationship to mood. And I found Steve Rhodes to be quite accurate here. He says, and this is, by the way, using the term mood in the sense of good mood or bad mood, being moody, not necessarily in the sense of the mood of individual circuitry, which requires matching, like being in the mood to eat pickles or being in the mood to watch obscure Wong Kar-wai movies or being in the mood to listen to a certain genre of music. He uses it more in the sense of what is going to, Steve Rhodes uses it in the sense of being in a good mood, what puts us in a good mood. Like when someone says, you're in a good mood today, they can't keep the mood to themselves. They're just so happy. Or, wow, you're in a really bad mood today. What happened? Did you wake up on the wrong side of bed? And Steve Rhodes says that the secret to mood, and therefore the secret to happiness, is tone. Tone. And that people who have tone 1 and 2, and either of their sun earths, are going to only be happy when they succeed. And they're going to be put in a very bad mood when they fail. I used to do day trading, stock trading, options. And I can tell you, I have a success tone. I have tone 2 on the design side. And I would be skipping on clouds when I had made a good trade. I'd get up in the morning, I would watch the market, I'd jump in, I'd buy some options, I'd sell those options. I would make a profit, I would feel so good. And then other times when I had to cut my loss, I would feel so bad. And I struggled and tried so hard to maintain, basically to control my mood with my mind, which is such a joke. Human design tells us we can't do this. It's mechanical. It's not something telling yourself there, it's not so bad. It's not going to make a difference. It's something that at a mechanical level, I am hardwired for success, and I am going to feel bad when I fail. And because it's on the design side, it's somewhat hard for me to accept about myself. The design side tones can be very difficult to accept. Success tone is competitive. Well, my personality isn't competitive. My personality is tone 3, respect. It doesn't want to look competitive. How déclassé to look competitive. How gauche, right? It doesn't want to seem like it's competing. It wants to be respected. So when you have different tonal binaries on the personality and design, you can see some interesting things there. That my design side, my body, what I'm using my body for, what I'm doing physically in the world is trying to compete for limited resources. And this helped me realize, why is it that I would have complaints in relationships that, yes, I'm in a committed monogamous relationship. I'm a 5th line after all, it's practical. And yet, why do I have 9 other women that are ready to jump in if the relationship ends? Well, that's the success binary. What if one were eaten by a saber-toothed tiger and one died of freezing? And these are genetic strategies going back to the time of cave people. And so the success binary is going to always have a certain competitive aspect of trying to be more popular than it needs to be, trying to make more money than it needs to be, trying to succeed and to compete in a way that is actually quite rejected in modern culture. You can really see the movement towards respect and feeling. In fact, you can see the battle between success and respect as a very early battle in the development of human consciousness, a battle that occurred within the left variable. We know that right variable consciousness only emerged in 1781. And so the success-respect battle was going on for tens of thousands of years before that, between the success people and the respect people. And the success people had no rules other than might makes right. And the respect people bonded together with various agreements of mutual respect and respect for mutual difference in order to triumph over the success people. And we can see this play out again and again in human history. So if you have tones 1 or 2 on the design side, your unconscious is hardwired to compete, and you might not be aware of it. Your personality might say, competitive? Not me. I'm not competitive at all. But your design side is hardwired to win. It's splenic. It's about survival. It's about fundamentals. Now going to the respect side, or I guess one final point on success. If it's on the design side, it's unconscious. If it's on the personality side, you're going to be aware of it, and you're also going to be put in a good mood when you use your mind to win. That is to say, using your mind to make money, using your mind to attract others, using your mind to gain favor, and so on. Using your mind to compete in that sense will put you in a good mood. This is the mood setter. And so it's interesting to me that I do enjoy giving human design readings, but I can have difficulty giving readings just for money. I like to have a personal connection to the person because I have respect tones on the personality side. And so someone that has success tones on the personality side, well, you're paying them, they're winning, they're succeeding. So they're already going to be put in a great mood by the simple fact they got paid. For me, I'm put in a good mood when somebody says, wow, I'm a big fan of your work, or I have some interesting questions for you, or the ajna binary is much more social, and it's about the meeting of the minds and communicating together with the other. So when we get to tones 3 and 4, these are the social, the ajna tones, and it's all about what people think and wanting to impress others, wanting to name drop, wanting others to admire you, and so on. And on the design side, it's being a snappy dresser and impressing them through acting or driving or anything, cooking, anything you can do physically. And on the personality side, it's things you use your mind for, remembering, speaking, articulating, making them laugh. It's interesting to see the difference in success.
Come on in.
Then finally, we go to feeling. And the feeling tones are really here to enjoy life. And they, once again, don't care what people think. Only respect tones care what people think. So it's funny that there's a before and an after caring what people think in the evolutionary line. Before we cared what each other thought, we were just trying to survive. After we have survival taken care of, success, then we have respect taken care of. We've built a culture around that success. Now it comes to feeling. I want to enjoy my life. And these are people that are really put in a good mood when they feel good. It sounds so simple, but yet if you don't have feeling tones, you're not going to be put in a good mood by what feels good. 2/3 of people out there are not going to be put in a good mood by what feels good. I'm not at all. But if you have feeling tones, then you're going to be put in a good mood by not having high stress and not having a lot of pressure and not having deadlines and not having, you don't find a lot of feeling tone people as brain surgeons. You don't find a lot of feeling tone people as airline pilots, these jobs that require vigilance and that have people's lives riding on the line. You find a lot of success-driven people in these professions. The feeling people don't end up being highly paid lawyers. They end up doing Uber and listening to their favorite music and having really comfy chairs and incense burning and things like that. And they're put in a good mood by what feels good to them. Likewise, they're put in a bad mood when the good feeling things are taken away. And that really shocked me. As a success respect person, I don't have feeling. So I don't necessarily know how to relax and feel good or how to be put in a good mood. I'm not put in a good mood by a massage. I'm put in a good mood by winning or by being respected, right? But I remember we went to this amazing restaurant with my friend in LA. And the first night we went there, great food, he's in a great mood. He's a double feeling guy, feeling on both sides. And then the next night we went back and they were closed. And he was in such a bad mood because he had looked forward to eating there again so much. And it just put him in the same bad mood that I would have been in if I'd lost a bunch of money in the stock market or if I'd been really disrespected. So this really gives us the key to what puts us in a good or a bad mood, right? The success people need to make money or win or achieve something that helps them succeed in the material plane, even if it's just fixing a car or something like that. They need to be competent and use their competence and compete, even if they're only competing against themselves, and then they're put in a good mood. The respect people need the admiration and the social quality, and then the feeling people need the comfort. Now, starting with this as the context, we can now look at the next binaries. And this shows how resilient we are. Colors 1 and 2 being low resilience and also low tolerance for differing opinions, at least at the personality side, low tolerance for conflicting views, low tolerance for a lot of people. And it sounds bad. It sounds like there's a huge disadvantage here. Why wouldn't we all want to be the higher colors, the more resilient? Well, the reason is that the lower colors, yes, they're more fragile in that sense, but they're also more sensitive and more reactive. And it's actually really enjoyable for them and the people in their lives to see their reactions. It's like tickling someone and watching them squeal. Colors 1 and 2 are so sensitive to being tickled. Colors 5 and 6 aren't ticklish. And so it's kind of exciting. And also, I'll say personally, as somebody who is in the realist binary, I feel honored the color 1 and 2 people in my life because I know that they don't let a lot of people in. If you have color 1 or 2 on the sun earths, on either a personality or design sun earth, it's very important for you to limit your exposure to other people and to have a tight-knit group of close friends who you trust, who you've vetted, who won't hurt you, because you are more easily hurt than the other colors. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not at all. The realists, the 3 and 4, they're neither too resilient or not resilient enough. And then the optimists, they're the ones who go through some crazy thing and then say, well, that was messed up. What's for dinner? Right? You know, they're the ones who just pick themselves right back up after a relationship, who just keep going. And finally, we get to line. And this is really the new perspective on lines that I want to impart. And he calls lines 1 and 2 reactive, 3 and 4 opportunistic, as I mentioned, and then 5 and 6 initiating. And it's just so interesting. Yeah, I guess during color, I was conflating being tickled and reacting with the fragility of color. They are different. I guess line level shows reactivity, color level shows resilience. But both of them have a commonality. I mean, we can see the tone all the way to the color, all the way to the line. There's a commonality between each binary. And that's why when I started this presentation, I only had line. And I was only going to talk about line. But I realized without going into the context of the tonal and color binaries, I didn't have a lot to say because what I actually wanted to impart was not just the reactivity of the lines, but the greater context of how we deconstruct the hexagram, how we deconstruct the 6-fold division into 2 parts, 2 parts, and 2 parts, or 2 lines each, 3 parts total. So looking at line now, this is something that can be so helpful in understanding yourself and others. I mean, each of these levels can be so helpful because you end up in all of these interesting combinations when you look at the sun, earth versus the nodes. Let's just go back for a moment to the tones. I'm success and respect, but I have feeling in my design nodes. What this means is I am a very type A, go-getter, competitive winner person, even if my mind doesn't see myself that way, because it's on my design side. And then I'm also a very respect-driven person. My personality loves the connection the ajna connection of one outer authority communicating with another outer authority. And I love telling jokes, and I love hearing jokes, and I love speaking and listening and doing all these things with respect. And I very much care what other people think, in the sense that I want us to all have nine-centered communion and connection. And that's what respect is all about. And yet, my design nodes are feeling. So if I didn't have human design, if I didn't have strategy and authority, if I didn't have the self-love and the self-acceptance of accepting that I'm success and respect driven, I would be drawn so strongly to being a feeling person, thinking I'm going to be put in a good mood by feeling good. And I would be looking for food and looking for sex and looking for all of the enjoyable things, incense and soft beds and, all of the feeling things, and going, why am I in such a bad mood all the time? Because the nodes do not set your mood. The nodes are not, right? Tone is the mood setter, but this is talking about the sun, earth. The nodes are what we're drawn to in others. And so what it really means is that I'm a very type A person who's not drawn to other type A people like myself. I do have success tone on the personality side, but I'm actually drawn to feeling people as well, even though I myself am not a feeling person. I'm drawn to people who know how to relax, who know how to have a good quality of life, who know how to, right, just kick their feet up and enjoy their life, and who enjoy high quality of life. Success isn't really concerned with quality of life. It's concerned with survival. And respect isn't really concerned with quality of life. It's concerned with what people think. So when we finally get to feeling, that's where we actually get to, what is it all there for? What is survival for? What is what other people think for? If it's not to feel good, if it's not to support my own enjoyment, life is not only meant to be lived, it's meant to be enjoyed. That's what tones 5 and 6 tell us. And if you carry tones 5 or 6 in your sun earths, it's very important for you to enjoy life. Not to say it isn't for success and respect people, but it's not the main point for them. But again, you see all the different permutations. You can have a double feeling person whose nodes are double success. And as not self, they're going to say, what's wrong with me? Why can't I make more money? Why am I not better at acquiring material resources? And you find a couple, and both people in the couple have double feeling sun earths, and both people in the couple have double success nodes. And they're criticizing each other and attacking each other, saying, why don't you make more money? And why don't you acquire more material resources? And the fact of the matter is, they're not here to acquire material resources. It doesn't put them in a good mood. They're put in a good mood by feeling good, by making a nice meal, by having quality time, by sitting by the river. This is right variable. This is the right variable. It's not the strategic left. And then the same goes for color, right? You can find somebody who, every possible permutation. You can find people who are low resilience sun earths and low resilience nodes. And they're very picky about who they let in their life, and they're very easily hurt. And they also like other people who are easily hurt. Or you can find low resilience people who have high resilience nodes, and they speak very quietly and they're very gentle and timid, but they're drawn to big, brash loudmouths or something like that. It's and of course, I'm not saying if you have colors 5 or 6, you are brash in that sense. I'm kind of painting a caricature of how it looks in the homogenized world. But you can see that without self-love, they're saying, what's wrong with me? Why am I so fragile? I need to toughen up. Why am I not resilient? I need to get out there and be more resilient. Because they have low resilience sun earth, they have high resilience nodes. And there can be a real complex there when you lack the self-love and the self-acceptance that human design brings. When you have that self-love, it's embracing and cherishing your design exactly the way it is, while also accepting that you're drawn to people who may not be like you. I like to joke that before human design, I'd be in a relationship and then I would break up and, what's wrong with you? You cheated on me. And then for a while, it's what's wrong with me? I'm drawn to people who cheat on me. And then after a while, it becomes, I love myself, and I guess I love the fact that I'm drawn to the kind of people that might not behave in the way that I expect, right? It's really that the self-love has this progressive aspect of accepting who you are, accepting who they are, and accepting the fact that you like who they are. And also accepting that you might like other qualities that they don't embody, that you might have feeling nodes and they might not have feeling in their sun earth. And instead of telling them they need to learn to enjoy life more, you accept the fact that you're going to be drawn to other people who embody those characteristics naturally, and not try to change your partner to embody those characteristics. So I do see the work of Steve Rhodes as having a special import when it comes to relationships, although it can also help in self-acceptance. And finally, we get to lines, and you see every possible combination of sun, earth, and nodes. I'm a 5-1, but my nodes are third lines. So I'm not really drawn to other 5-1s. I want people to be more opportunistic. I like opportunists. I like people who bump into somebody and say, let's go, let's do it. I'm not necessarily drawn to those who are very reactive or those who are very stoic and unreactive. It's interesting to see, right? In every one of these cases, you find people that are success driven and they're drawn to respect, or they're feeling driven and they're drawn to success, or any combination thereof. Feeling people drawn only to other feeling people. I mean, you see every possible combination and permutation, and it really gives such a rich, full picture of humanity and the human condition. And that's why I really appreciate what Steve Rhodes has brought to human design knowledge through his own original research. Research which, by the way, he learned by spending about a decade reading 2,000 biographies of historical figures for which he had accurate birth times, so that he could generalize and learn about what all tone 1 and 2 had in common, what tones 3 and 4 had in common, and so on. And you find every combination. You find the realist who's only drawn to pessimists, or the optimist who's drawn to realists, or every different permutation in that regard as well. You find the sort of mice and men theme of the very high resilience color 5 and 6 person who has colors 1 and 2 in their nodes, and they're drawn to meek, timid people. And again, I'm saying as a caricature of the homogenized world. I don't think that the color 1 and 2 people that I know in my life in the human design experiment are meek and timid. That's simply the caricature of what it can look like in the homogenized world. And then finally, we see very interesting traits when we're looking at line, because we can see that certain profiles have what we might call certain advantages or disadvantages. Steve Rhodes claimed that the most sexually successful were 3-5, 3-6, and 4-6 profiles. And he also mentioned the 6-3, but a little less so. And he said that it's because the 3-5, the 3-6, and the 4-6 combine an unreactive personality with a design that can initiate. And by the design initiating, he meant that at a physical level, their body will actually make the first move. And it's funny, if there's any 5-1s out there, you've probably had this experience where your personality has no problem talking a big talk and seducing someone. But then when it comes time and you're laying next to each other in bed, you're not going to make the first move because your first line design is here to react. But if they touch your shoulder or something, then you can react to that. And suddenly there's a reaction that takes place. But it is interesting, the 3-5, 3-6, and the 4-6. And I was thinking back, and it's true. I mean, their personality is there ready for the opportunity. And then you turn around and they've taken off all their clothes. I mean, they kind of have this ability to initiate physically that the other lines don't have. So you can look at different profiles through this lens and you can see, okay, the 1-3 and the 1-4, and I guess the 2-4, those are the most reactive. Those are the 3 most reactive there are. because they have reactive minds combined with opportunist bodies. Once you get to the 2-5, you have a very interesting stretch. They're both reactive and initiating, similar to the 5-1, the 5-2, and the 6-2. So you see these different groupings of, right, the groupings of the people who are only reactive and only opportunist, and they lack the ability to initiate. The people who are opportunist and they're initiating, and they're the least reactive of all, the 3-5, the 3-6, the 4-6. And then you find people who are reactive and initiating, and they're the most polar in that sense, which can also be such a shock. If you have a 5-1 or a 5-2 or a 6-2, and their personality is so implacable and stoic and unreactive, it can be shocking when they finally do react. And it's often something physical that makes them react. They're reacting to perhaps a hypochondria type reaction to some physical ailment, or they're so stoic until somebody touches their shoulder and then they freak out, or who knows what it is, right? But there are these times where the design reacts so strongly and it surprises everyone because the personality was so unreactive. You don't expect them to cry and suddenly they're breaking down crying, that kind of thing. So that's the final slide for the presentation. I think we should all take a short break and come back at 10 minutes after, and I'd like to open up the discussion at that point. Thank you all for joining me on this journey into some new perspectives, new forays into the analysis of lines, as well as coming with me on the journey through tone and color, which I realize is quite a bit of information, but I feel is necessary to give context. So let's take a short break and we'll be back at 10 minutes after the hour. All right. Thank you all for joining for that. I'm going to see if there's any comments or questions in the chat, and then I'll open up. Rachel said, the relationship wizard is a 6'3". She's been in a relationship with a 6'3" for over a decade. Familiarity breeds contempt. Interesting. I used to think of that as more of a fifth line keynote, but maybe that's just true in all cases. Maybe we can universalize that. Rachel writes, she feels the nodes in both astrology and human design are like magnets, and they look like them, the draw or push, but are magnetic. That's a really good point. Yeah, there is something, I mean, and we see again and again nodal connections where somebody is in a relationship with or has family members who have Sun, Earth, and the nodes and things and so on. Okay, Rachel asks, do you feel that binary relationships have a special compatibility? Like is a 6-2 feeling more harmonic with 5-1 than with the 3-5s, which provoke her much more, but she does have a strong 39 gate. Well, I think the 55 is more about being provoked. That 39 is more provocative. Maybe you're provoking them to provoke you in some sense. But yeah, as far as, I mean, there's going to be different ways we connect with different people. It would also be interesting. Let's actually have everyone's charts here. And so as we look at questions, I'm going to actually be opening up people's charts. And so, yeah, let me just share that here. So we can see that your personality nodes are sixth line. Now, interestingly, the sixth line has harmony to the third line, but Steve Rhodes actually makes a bigger deal about the binaries. So again, it's interesting. When Ra looks at the nodes, he tends to more look at the harmonies, that is the sixth to the third line. But when Steve Rhodes looks at the nodes, he looks at the binaries, that is the sixth to the fifth line. So that would show that you're drawn to fifth and sixth line people here, and then you're drawn to first and second line people on that side. Now, of course, I don't know how far we can take this level of analysis because Ra also talks about the harmonic resonance, right? The sixth and the third line, and the first and the fourth line. So by this point, we have all 6 lines that you have some connection with, either through binary or through harmony. So it's going to be something that I'll leave up to you to explore more. But yeah, but that is definitely, it's interesting to analyze, not just looking at the harmonies, but also looking at the binaries. Rachel comments that hope people, self-doubting pessimists. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about pessimism and hope, right? And also the transference, like when guilt people are so naturally optimistic, they think they can fix anything. When they transfer to hope, they're too optimistic. They're hoping their partner quits drinking. That's overly optimistic. They're hoping for things that'll never come, hoping they'll win the lottery, right? That the truly intelligent hope of someone who actually is hope motivation, not in transference, is pessimistic. It knows what to hope for. The 48 permutations by Ra, I haven't seen them published. I know he was working on them, and they may be actually. And he had a fun name for it. It was, let me see if I can actually, I might have it in my notes right here, because I was just looking into this. It's such an interesting, and I was talking to Aloknand Diaz about it. And yeah, he is called The Directory. It's simply called The Directory. And I don't know that it was published, but I know that he was working on it. And in fact, Alok Diaz's talk this year for the High Desert Human Design Conference is called From Type to Role. And I'll just read what Alok wrote about it here. He said, what is normally addressed as the deconditioning process is actually something that can be measured in a synthesized way by consistently looking out for just 2 keynotes, type and profile. That's probably why one of the first HD materials that Ra ever wanted to have published was called The Directory. In this book, he basically elaborated on the 48 variations that you get when you combine 4 types per 12 profiles. I have seen this. It is out. I don't know if it was called the directory or if it was included in early materials. Maybe someone else in the group knows and can post in the comments if so. But yeah, I actually have seen this, so it does exist. As it is something that is already done, Alok does not intend to repeat that job, but his intention is to show participants the way he looks at any individual chart from a perspective in which the two extremes of the binary contained within any chart become evident by just seeing the way the type and the profile are configured within the general imprinting of the individual design. So yeah, quite an interesting way of looking at it, kind of starting with type and profile and then seeing the imprint in that context. Sorsha, let me just pull up your chart here. Okay. Sorsha asks, oh, sorry, just as soon as I did that, I lost the, okay, I'll just 1 moment. Sorsha has a question on her personality and design. She has 42 line 1. She saw the YouTube vid about the plan. So is it her job to end things because of fears of security or to get ready for 2027? Or is it better to just do nothing and watch what happens as an observer? Because of strategy and authority, and she's dealing with a 1-3 reflector and a 5-1 manifesting generator. So you're talking about gate 42 line 1 and kind of what that's about. Well, let's take a look. And also we have the nodes in 42 right now. So let's see, where's your, I see, yeah, you have your Jupiters in gate 42 line 1. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't draw any conclusions, especially about that. And especially when we get into locks and keys, what I mainly look for in that, which, yeah, it is funny that the plan is to end things. That's kind of, yeah, what's going on right now? You know, what if there was no doubt, if there was any doubt in anyone's mind about where things are headed, you just have to look at the keynote for the global cycle that we're in, which is the plan, one of the 8 keynotes, and what the current key is to that lock, which is gate 42, line 1. And that is ending things. So we're absolutely, the plan for the program is to end, to bring things to completion, to ending. You know, anyone who has a key to the global cycle is going to have some role to play. It's not necessarily something you have to try to do or think about doing or take into account in analysis because it's so hard for us to fathom what our role is in the totality. It's something that's more interesting just to note that you have a job to do in this era and that you're kind of off the clock once the keys change. So that's something to look at. But just while we're looking at your chart, we can do a little bit of the other analysis, which is being a 2-4, you have nodes that are 5 and 1. So you yourself have what in Steve Rhodes' system he would classify as a reactive personality. So first of all, just accepting that and realizing you might react very strongly, and it might be a very positive reaction, but a strong negative reaction could be just around the corner, or vice versa. And that's okay, that these strong reactions shouldn't be denigrated, right? There are situations where somebody might be a 5th or a 6th line personality, and they get into human design and they say, wow, human design is incredible. It's taught me how to not be reactive. And look how unreactive I am. And to them, I say, it's natural for you to be unreactive. I mean, there's good and bad forms, or healthy and unhealthy, productive, unproductive forms of each of these things. It's all a binary. And so there are times when it can be really important to be reactive. And there are times when it's not suited. And it's really just realizing that part of the self-acceptance and the self-love is not trying to be anything other than what you are. So if you have a strong reaction to something, that's okay. You're kind of designed that way. And if you're in a relationship with someone and they're saying, why are you reacting so strongly? You can remind them, well, you know, I might have reacted in a strong negative way, but I also let go of it really quickly. Or I also moved on and had a reaction in a different way. But I guess what I'm saying is we shouldn't idealize non-reactivity. like the sort of sixth line ideal of the Buddha sitting there with no attachments, who doesn't react to anything, and you push a pin in their thumb, in their big toe, and they don't even wince, right? The person who's so non-attached to life that they're beyond reacting to good news, to bad news, to anything. There are so many ideals that are placed upon us, and it's not about the ideals. It's about living out your life and your story. And if your story is more or less reactive, so be it. There's a benefit to each, and there's an advantage to each. And so having fifth line personality nodes, we might imagine that you might be trying to be less reactive. You don't need to be. You can just accept the fact that you like people whose personalities are less reactive.
Yeah, I laughed a lot. This whole I've been laughing and laughing because it's so funny just to hear all this. It just helps a lot.
Good. Yeah. And I think really the difference in the sun, earths, and the nodes can be really profound. I mean, knowing that you might be you're more success driven. And so trying to talk yourself into not needing to win, not needing money, and not needing material things, and not needing to succeed, it's not going to work. You know, you need those things. You're hardwired for success, but your nodes are feeling. And so you're going to be drawn to people with really high quality of life, really enjoy them lives and enjoy themselves, and so on. And so there's a, you know, there's a big difference between the sun, earth, and the nodes. And I think that they can get confused sometimes. Yeah. Like we can think we need to be our nodes. You might end up thinking, wow, I really need to relax more. Well, what's going to put you in a good mood, according to Steve Rhodes anyway, is succeeding in the material plane. That's what the splenic binary is all about. So Rachel says she has double respect tones and I'm not motivated to do things for money, but loves to do things for respect. Yeah, same with Mark Germain, who was just here in the pre-class hangout chat. Mark is double respect, and he's a snappy dresser, and he's a great comedian. You find a lot of actors have respect tones. He loves making people laugh. He loves, it's very social. I mean, Steve Rhodes didn't have any respect tones, so maybe that makes him the best person to describe them, or maybe it makes him the worst, or maybe he's the best in some ways and the worst in others. But because of his complete lack of respect tones, he really was able to describe respect tone people from an interesting vantage point, where from his perspective, he describes them as people who only really live for others, that if they climbed a mountain, it doesn't matter until they've told someone about it. And he describes them as the worst braggarts and name droppers and so on. And he kind of looks at the negative side of it. Perhaps he doesn't understand that there's also a social aspect to that of the ajna center and the ajna center's role in the totality and in the evolution between and navigating between the left variable success and the right variable feeling, and that the ajna center is right in the middle, split down the middle between left and right variable, between action and meditation. And says she has to go. Excited to finish watching the rest. It's so juicy. Well, I'm glad you think so. I think it's pretty juicy too. And I've had people tell me, Jonah, I love your work, but please cut out the Steve Rhodes stuff. And I say, why? This is great. It's giving us a whole new set of perspectives to look at these things from. Yeah, a lot of feeling tone people are hippies. Yeah, probably. I mean, we could really adapt. There's all these hippie jokes like, how do you know a hippie has been at your house? They're still there. Or how many hippies does it take to screw in a light bulb? 5, 1 to screw it in and 4 to share the experience. Yeah, I think we could pretty much replace the word hippie with feeling tone and the jokes would still work. Phil says, feeling tone guy here, lol. Massage hippies, yippee. Well, you're not a hippie, Phil. You're just a lover of life and someone who really, the other thing, and it might be because I have feeling tone nodes and I really like the feeling people. they make me feel good and they make everyone feel good. And they kind of bring a good feeling with them, and they make subtle adjustments to the space to make it more comfortable. And they put on nice music and they make good food. And they really know the value of quality of life, which is something that a success person like myself might not recognize the value of. I can't put a dollar amount on it, you know, or even respect is like, well, it's valuable if it gains me the respect of others and admiration and connection. But feeling, yeah, feeling is really all about quality of life. And these three parts, right variable, touch, feeling, and feeling. Sorsha says she was confused and conditioned by the feeling people. Yeah, well, I mean, with your nodes being feeling, that's what we're talking about. We can get lost in our nodes. We can end up trying to be our nodes rather than realizing that's what we're meant to see. And those are the other people that we're drawn to. Bill says he's color 2 on both design and personality side. Yeah. Then Rachel, I agree with the limited exposure of people is a good thing when followed by those who it is correct for. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying to like mentally decide I'm not going to have friends or something, but it's more just if your job is a bartender, you know, hopefully if you're color 1 or 2, you're a bartender at a really close knit, cool place that has a lot of regulars and people who all know each other. And you're not a bartender on like the Las Vegas Strip or something. It's just, I don't think any of us would want to be a bartender there. Steph says this class is blowing her mind in the best way. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for that compliment. And Rachel says she'd love if I did a locks and keys class. Yeah, I've been wanting to do, I don't know if it can be a whole 8 or 10 week class. I was thinking it might just be a 4-day workshop where I do 2 days on, 1 day off, and then maybe last 2 days being Saturday and Sunday. And that way I can kind of do an intensive on locks and keys because it's a rich topic. I don't know that it has the sustained, well, it might be. I should mention, for those who aren't able to make the HDHD conference, if you are able to make the post-conference retreat, it is open to people, not just at the conference. Also, if you are able to make the HDHD conference, let me know. We've had some cancellations and I can get you a ticket for sure. It starts in 2 days, so I don't anticipate that many people are ready to just jump on a plane. But if you are able to, please do. But then the post-conference retreat begins on September 19th and ends on my 40th birthday, September 25th. And actually, let me just, while we're on this topic, and I've been meaning to send out a couple messages about this because I was waiting to see if it filled up first with people who were attending the conference, but there's still some spots left. And it did not fill up. And so, yeah, we have a payment plan. And basically, the idea is we have 5 class days and 2 field trip days. So it's a total of 7 days. We have 20 sessions total, each one being about an hour, hour and a half, 30 hours of class material. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this an annual, I mean, this is an annual conference. This is the 3rd annual one. But unlike the last 2 years where we just went camping and kind of had an informal camping thing, this year we're going to be teaching and I have guest teachers. And then we're also going to have a monthly follow-up Zoom every month on the 25th. Because the last day of class, my birthday is September 25th. Then every month after that, just to stay in touch with everyone who was at the retreat. And so yeah, if anyone is able to come, it starts September 19th. I would recommend arriving by September 18th, as we have, that's Monday, a week from today. We have kind of a special dinner meet and greet. And then it culminates on my birthday. It's going to be hosted here, but then we actually also have another venue. We're going to go for one night for kind of glamping camping. I mean, it's camping, but it's about an hour out of Santa Fe on a beautiful property with 5 structures. So we have bathrooms and kitchens and Netflix, things like that. So it's not really camping. It's camping, but it is, I mean, it is camping. It's on we're going to be in this beautiful property of a friend of mine. And I just, yeah, I'll post this in the chat in a moment. But yeah, this is basically what we're doing. And we're doing base theory day 1 and day 2. Mike will be teaching rave cosmology. So each day we're going to I'll do basically an hour, hour and a half class, take a break, then an hour and a half Q&A. Then we take another break, and then Mike is going to do the afternoon, rave cosmology. Then day 2 of base theory, day 2 of rave cosmology. Then that night we go camping and have our field trip. Then we're doing global cycles, locks, and keys, which is why I kind of thought of this. We have 2 days of that, and Richard Corbett will be teaching human design and astrology, doing chart readings for people, as well as doing Q4 transit analysis and looking at the major transits leading up to 2027. And so it'll kind of fit in with the global cycle theme. Then we have another field trip day. For this one, we're going to the Dwan Light Sanctuary. We're going to go to some hot springs and be hosted by friends in a small town about an hour out of Santa Fe. And then we're doing a symposium on the planets. And I just talked to Mark Germain about it today, and he is joining. And so he will also be contributing to the post-conference retreat, giving readings for people, and things like that. So yeah, so we have a lot of fun in store. And so if anyone is able to zip out this way, I just posted the link to that. But yeah, I love locks and keys. It's a really fun topic. Okay, so let's look at Orabelle's chart. Let's see what we got, and let's do a little bit of the analysis here. Orabelle Reyes, here we are. So starting with tone, the mood setter, personality tone 1, which is success, design tone 5, which is feeling. So this is a funny combination. This is the same as James Alexander. So with his success mind, he really enjoys, I mean, he's very, very good at just cranking out readings for people. And he's just so productive. It's like, this is a success-driven mind that when you're getting paid to use your mind, that's great. It's going to put you in a great mood. I mean, he can make, $300 a reading and just crank them out. And it's like, he's such a marathon runner. This is tones 1 and 2 are really marathon runners in that sense, where their mind is just that left variable, strategic, highly competent, highly competent. Not to say that 5 and 6 tone aren't competent, but that it's just different. They have different skill sets. The right variable skill set is about going deep into things in its own way and kind of holistically producing a sort of a distilled essence of what that's about, or a crystalline sort of, someone who spent a lot of time with Ra, who was right variable, feeling tones, they could actually bring somewhat of the feeling of what Ra expressed, and they can transmit a cleaner, more pure, crystallized essence of that experience. But someone who's left variable or success tone, they're going to be able to articulate the strategic patterns and things like that. It's going to be a very different approach, and what we kind of commonly identify as someone who's very competent. Of course, there are different kinds of competencies. It's like Many Intelligences, that book that talks about different kinds of intelligence, different kinds of competency. And but in any case, that first tone personality, my good friend Von Paul, he's a first tone personality as well, and he has feeling body. And so just like James Alexander, these are people who really are put in a good mood when they're succeeding based on their mind, when they're able to remember something, and that use of the mind to remember helps them make money, or helps them succeed, or helps them procure survival on the material plane, or procure favor from others, to be popular among others. It's funny because you would think the popular kids in school are respect, but they're not. They actually didn't care what anyone thought. They're success people, right? The really popular people are success because you can compete for popularity just like you can compete for money. So using your mind to have more than enough potential options and partners, options and jobs, to have more than enough money, to have more than enough material resources, all of these things. That's the success mind. I have a cute little story I tell about Von Paul and his success mind. I poured him some mezcal, And I turned around, and a minute later he said, Jonah. And I turned and it was empty. And he said, I spilled it. So I refilled his glass. And he said, sucker. Success mind, always finding a way to. I'm like, I would have just given you more mezcal if you said you drank it. But, he wanted to pretend that he'd spilled it. And, that puts him in a good mood, kind of getting a leg up on others. But then on the design side, it's all about feeling. And so same for James Alexander. I always offer James to stay at my home here. And he said, I don't know, Jonah, I don't want to sleep on a pile of leaves. And I'm like, my home is not a pile of leaves. I have wonderful beds and but I'm not a feeling person per se. So I can be a little bit like, yeah, that's your bed right there. And he's like, yeah, I mean, he wants, a scented candle or something, I guess. Now, at the same time, Von Paul is feeling on the design side, and he will literally sleep in a pile of leaves. So I don't think that this is a hard and fast rule. I think it's more just the success personality really just cares about, it's splenic, so it's physical. It cares about the physical. It wants to fix the thing that's broken, or it wants to, I guess, also your color 5, so doubly so. But because color 5, of course, is guilt is the fixer and so on. But I guess I was saying fix just in the sense of it wants things to work. It wants the material to be, if it's very competent, it's very physical oriented. In some sense, it's like saying you have a physical mind. Whereas if you had an ajna binary mind, it would be like a mind. And if you had a solar plexus binary mind, it's like saying you have an emotional mind. So it's kind of funny to think about it that way. A mind for the physical, a mind that's good at the physical, a mind that's good at making money, a mind that's good at making things work. It's good at delivering under pressure. It's good at, you find success mind people as lawyers and doctors and all these high pressure situations that don't necessarily feel good. Now, also, what Steve Rhodes called it, he said, the success people are the ultimate prostitutes, in that the feeling people, it doesn't feel good to prostitute yourself. The respect people care so much what others think, but the success mind doesn't really care if it feels good or what anyone thinks. So this is kind of being able to prostitute your mind. Pay me enough, I'll use my mind for anything. I don't care if you understand it. I don't care, I'm not looking for the understanding of the ajna. I don't care if it feels good. I'll use my mind in a way that feels very uncomfortable and pressuring it and deadlines and working really hard. But I'm making that money and I'm succeeding where others failed, and I'm winning in this game of how to survive on the material plane. And yet the feeling body, well, that's, it doesn't want the body. The design side is not going to be in a good mood if it's made to do something without getting the reward of pleasure, then the reward of new experience, the reward of good food, of sensuality, of sexuality, of any of these feeling things. Yeah. So at the tonal level, we have the success and the feeling, and then you're drawn to double success people. So as the not self, this is like trying to be more successful than you are. You're already really successful, but you want to be even more successful. Steve Rhodes uses the example of a quad success person who was, I think it was Michael Schumacher, who was already hugely successful in a competitive environment, F1 racing. And yet, because he had success nodes, he wanted to be even more successful. So realizing that the more you have the self-acceptance and self-love that human design brings you, the more you can accept that you're drawn to other highly competent type A success people who don't care what anyone thinks of them, who don't even care if it feels good. They're just success-driven winners, and you're drawn to these winners, and that's okay, and that you yourself are already very successful. It's kind of impossible for you not to be with your success tone. Right? Which is not to say that, if you are losing, that you should try to convince yourself to be in a good mood. Success tone people will never be in a good mood when they're losing. If you're losing money, you got to change something so you're making money. And if you're losing out in other competitive environments, it's change something so you start winning out in those environments. But, you know, the idea here is really just that the nodes are what we strive to be as the not self and what we're drawn to in others as the true self. And just accepting the fact that you really like others who can be very successful. And then if you are in a relationship with someone and they don't have success tones, realizing that it does no good to say, you should get a job, you should make more money, you should charge more, any of these things, that's not who they are. They're not motivated, or I guess not really motivation, but they're not fueled, we could say in that sense, by the same stuff. They're not put in a good mood by winning. They're not put in a good mood by making money. They're put in a good mood by making someone laugh, or they're put in a good mood by eating a nice meal. At the color level, we have the double high resilience. So this is, you know, the low resilience people are worried they're going to be hurt. The high resilience people are worried they're going to be bored, right? If you came to you know, high desert human design, the big fear would be that you would get stuck in a boring situation at the conference. And so just being high resilience, realizing that you might be underutilizing your high resilience and you might need more strangers. You might need more excitement. You might need more risk. You might need to travel in foreign countries where you don't know the language, and you might need to put yourself in unfamiliar situations and challenge yourself in that way. And that if you're feeling despondent, it might be because you're too comfy and, you know, it's a different thing. It's like, my mom is double high resilience, and I got her to go to Costa Rica, and she lit up and came to life. She was bored sitting at home watching Netflix. She needed new experience. She needed strangers. She comes to life around strangers. When you have this high resilience, you need a certain level of the experiential. Remember, this is the solar plexus, 5 and 6. Even though in traditional human design, we don't teach the color or the line as following the same binary of tone, there is some continuity there, as we're seeing. And then what you're drawn to is medium and high resilience people. So you might have a hard time understanding the color 1 and 2 people. It might seem that they have very little tolerance for other people's points of view, or I mean, to you, it might seem that way. To them, they might be extremely tolerant. It's all relative to our own vantage point. It's the realist in the middle who actually is kind of the arbiter of the two, which again points to the ajna as the arbiter between the left and the right variable, between survival needs and quality of life concerns. So yeah, realizing that if you're in a relationship with someone who's color 1 or 2, you might have a tendency to be critical of them, to tell them to toughen up, and that's not necessarily right for them. They don't need to toughen up. They don't need to just get back out there and get back on their feet and start dating again after a big loss. Or, you know, they need to be limited in who they allow in to their life, into their circles, and they need to have you know, a vetting process to only let people in who aren't going to hurt them, because they are going to take longer to recover from a loss than others, and that's okay. They're also going to gain all of the benefits and reap all the rewards of having color 1 or 2. And some of those rewards are that they, you know, music sounds louder to them, and food tastes stronger to them, and so on, things like that. They're not necessarily desensitized in the way color 5 and 6 can be. But just realizing, being a double high resilience person, that you're going to need a certain amount of excitement in your life, and that actually the problem isn't what could go wrong, it's the problem of what if nothing goes wrong? Then I'm going to be stuck in this boring situation where nothing happens, right? It's a very different problem for the high resilience. And then finally, when we get to lines, being a 5-1, and then nodes, 5th and 3rd line nodes. So being a 5-1, realizing that the unreactive personality, the personality that's not here to react, it is initiating, in Steve Rhodes' terminology. Well, you're not a manifester. So at a mechanical level, you're not here to initiate. And yet there is something mechanical about profile. Really, it has to do with your purpose and your role. And so it is realizing that even though you're not here to initiate mechanically the way a manifester does through the aura in a way that causes impact, you can nevertheless change the topic, because your personality can sense when something's getting boring and needs to shift. Or your personality can say, hey, I have an idea, let's try that. Or your personality can sort of say, I mean, this is what seducing is even. Wouldn't it be nicer if we sat over there on the couch and turned on some music? And, you know, the personality is going to initiate in some sense of the term, while you still follow your strategy and authority of waiting to respond and waiting for the emotional clarity. So it's not going to be correct for you to preempt your response and to say, I have to make this happen and I have to get out there and do it and all this stuff. And of course, with the bridging, with bridging gates from the throat, gate 16, gate 20, gate 22, gate 8, there is going to be a strong conditioning to act like a manifester. And that's going to be something that you'll have to decondition from as you handle the waiting better and better and better, and allow the waiting to build up more and more and more before taking action, and so on. Really, truly waiting for that emotional clarity and waiting for things that you sacrally respond to and are clear about. And yet your personality is not meant to be reactive, and it is going to operate in a way that can initiate mentally, which is again not going to be a decision for you. It's more like you can say, hey, let's watch a movie. Then someone needs to say, do you want to watch a movie? And then you can actually go through the response process. But the mind is going to come up with ideas of what could be a way forward. Whether or not it is going to ultimately depend on whether you are then given an opportunity to respond to that. But your personality is going to be quite good at coming up with these things. At the design level, it's realizing that the unconscious, the design, is the most reactive of all. And that while you may seem so unreactive, the right touch might have you sobbing in tears, or the right hug may cause a whole body reaction, or the right encounter. I mean, when I watch movies, I'm crying my eyes out, or when I'm touched so deeply at a physical, unconscious level that's so visceral. It's in my blood. It's my whole being is reactive. My personality is not. It can be quite stoic. And then because the nodes are fifth and third lines, realizing that you might not like other people who are so reactive. You might say, stop overreacting and chill out and don't be so reactive. But that's simply that you're drawn to, 3 5s, 4 6s, and 6 3s, and people like that who are less reactive as people. So yeah, that's the kind of way I would analyze that from the Steve Rhodes perspective. I like what Rachel commented. We don't need to be our nodes, but maybe we might need to import them. Oh, also, I'll say, by the way, if you want to comment or about, you certainly can. Otherwise, I can keep going through the messages. But if anyone wants to comment as I'm going, please interject. It's totally fine. I see Rachel's comment. She says she's with a zero respect nodes for Sun Earth person, and they're super self-contained / absorbed. And she loves that about them as a feeling and respect nodes person. Yeah. I mean, it's really about acceptance. We don't need, everyone doesn't have to do everything, right? And she loves Steve Rhodes. Yeah, I do too. He's great. It took me a while. It took me a while, maybe for who knows what reason, but I finally came around, and I just really enjoy what Steve Rhodes has contributed to human design. Rachel comments, feeling people massage the vibe. Yeah, they do. They get people feeling good. Okay. Yeah, as far as locks and keys, even a workshop, yes, I agree. I think that'd be great. Happy solar return. Thank you, Rachel. And thanks for those who, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Dorsha. Sorsha says she hated working anywhere in Las Vegas. Yeah. I understand. I was just in Vegas last week, and I remembered what it was all about there. It's definitely, places have a certain frequency and they attract a certain spirit, and the spirit of the people there. It's a certain quality that they bring to them. I don't have a problem with Las Vegas. I can, it's like what Steve Rhodes said about compatibility. Uh, your compatibility, how much time you can spend with somebody. Well, we have compatibility with the place, with the spirit of the place, and with the spirit of the people as well. And that compatibility is how much time we can spend there before it starts to turn, before it goes to the other side of the binary. How long can you spend with the fourth line till the kindness turns to meanness, and so on? Rachel says she wishes she could attend and prays for next year. I certainly hope so. And Orabel, OMG. Okay, well, that's a nice. Yeah, I don't expect you to be too reactive. You know, you're a fifth line personality, but I hope that's a good OMG and not a bad one. Sorsha says she's planning for next year HDHD and has family in Albuquerque. Her nephew called off his weddings. Maybe he'd be interested in checking it out. Yeah, well, if he's into human design, send him my way. You have my email. Emily says this is also interesting. Thanks for including BaanTu in the class. She's success tone, personality, and design. Well, go get them, winner. You're here to win. Don't let anyone tell you to have a positive mental attitude about non-competition. You know, you don't need to succeed materially to have that. You're like, actually, I'm designed to succeed in the material plane. But you know, it's more than just money. It's also being really popular and having a nice car, a nice place to live. I'm joking. I'm joking. Success tone can get a reputation for being superficial. And, you know, it was funny for me to realize with my respect mind and my undefined solar plexus, not really wanting to show people my true motivations and so on. And realizing I have success tone on the design side and realizing, wow, even though I do consider myself a very stable, monogamous person, there's always part of the success tone that wants more than enough. And that includes more than enough potential love interests in case something might happen. I mean, I call it, I was laughing with a success tone woman about it, saying she has backup husband number one, backup husband number two, you know, she has them all in a row in case something happens. So. Orabel says, this is amazing. In fact, amazing. Well, I'm really glad you like that. I like it too. I think it's really interesting part. This is me trying to be reactive. It's so funny when we have a low reactivity personality, like trying to react. I mean, Rachel says, high resilience needs high contact. Absolutely. And thank you. It's been an awesome class and wonderful series. I really appreciate it. Loves the tonal stuff. Steph says, tone's going to be the next rabbit hole she goes down. I hope so. Orville says, thank you, gracias. Love your description and perspective. Really resonates. Thank you. Steph, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I'll show that in a moment. First, let me just look at yours, Steph, and then I'll show the presentation again. And this presentation will be uploaded as well. So, all right. So, yeah, double success tones. So tones 1 and 2 are both success. So like I was saying for Orabel, although Orabel had feeling on the design side, but and like Emily just said, she has double success. So double success and double high resilience. I mean, this is really built to be able to handle a lot and to go out there in the world and sort of go to the Amazon rainforest with, you know, nothing but a knife and a and a, you know, lighter or something like that, you know, be able to really survive a lot. I was talking to Richard Corbett about this. He went to he's medium and high resilience, but he's double success tones as well. And so very, very capable in the physical world. And he went on a trip in the Amazon rainforest. And after the 2-week trip, he was talking to the guide, and the guide said, well, you know, I'm going out deeper in the jungle. Do you want to come with me? He said, sure. We went with the guy, and the guy only brought a loincloth and a knife, and they hunted piranhas and alligators, and they drank water from the leaves. I mean, that's an experience, you know, and it takes that high resilience. And he was also, he was a captain in the military, and really just with the success, just so good at what they do. And so, I mean, this is the deepest of the left variable, the most strategic of the strategic. And then with these high resilience tones, just being able to handle so much and to be able to bounce back from that, having such a high tolerance for different opinions, such a high tolerance for things going wrong and so on. But also having that great need for having such a need for variety and for difference, novelty. And then being drawn to success and feeling people. You have the same variable as me, the PLL, DLR, actually. And so we really like feeling people. We might not relax that much, but we like people who know how to relax, damn it. And then, but then also being drawn to the medium and high resilience. So again, that issue I mentioned of maybe not appreciating the lower resilience colors as much. And yeah, being a 4-6, being one of the 3 profiles that Steve Rhodes pointed out that have the easiest time in starting a new relationship or getting in with others in a romantic way, because that 4th line personality is waiting for the opportunity, and that 6th line design can initiate when needed, but again, not as a manifester, not mechanically initiating, simply playing the role of the one who changes things or starts things. So it is very similar. I mean, it's interesting to think about how is it having a 6th line but not being a manifester. And so few of us actually are manifestors. So few 6th lines actually are manifestors. I mean, it's an interesting question. And this is something that I think gets into Ra Uru Hu's work on the directory of the 48 combinations of type and profile, and how you end up with these interesting combinations where you have like a 5-1 manifester like Ra, where it really makes sense, and his initiating personality very much coincides with his initiating aura. But then you have a 1-3 manifester like Elokanand Diaz. He is so reactive, and yet he still initiates, but his personality isn't initiating anything. It's hanging out. The initiating is something that occurs at a mechanical level through the aura when it's the right time, through the emotional clarity and through the mechanics of his 35-36 and so on. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing to see. Then you have, I'm a 5-1 generator, or so is Oravel, where we have 5th line personality that can initiate mentally, but then that is not the correct decision necessarily for it. I think up all sorts of stuff that might not be the right decision to make. So I need somebody to then ask me so I can check with my own sacral if I actually am on board with the thing I came up with. And being a 4-6, and having to wait for invitations and having to all of that waiting, where meanwhile that design is so good at initiating in some sense. It's an interesting thing to have the role, the personality. And also, as we looked at in earlier classes, the difference between personality and design, where the personality is the continuity and the design is the development, so that the design will initiate change to unstick things, to get things moving again. But that's not necessarily making a decision. And that if you initiate making a decision by saying, that's it, I quit this job and I'm going there now and I'm starting this and I'm going to have my new life and all of that, that is what is not correct for the projector who has to wait to be invited. So you can see that it takes a bit to disentangle this layer of initiating lines. And I think that's another reason why Steve Rhodes' work hasn't caught on in human design communities, because they look at it and they say, how can he say the 5th and 6th lines are initiating? Only manifestors are here to initiate. Well, yes, that's true. The decision-making must be according to strategy and authority. It's simply the role, and it's realizing that there's a certain affinity or a certain reuse of the dichotomy between responding or reacting versus initiating. And it really depends how we use these words as well. But yeah, looking at some of the nuances here, and then being drawn to 2nd and 3rd lines. So being actually drawn to reactive people. Maybe as homework, try looking up on TikTok or YouTube some reaction videos and see if you enjoy them. Because my assumption would be that somebody with nodes in either the first or second lines would really enjoy watching other people react, watching a strong reaction. Okay, well, let me go ahead and show these graphics again. And then I'll also be sharing this in the shared Google Drive. So let's see, what's the best graphic for it? I don't really have everything on one page. So I think this might be something where I'll make sure it's uploaded as both a PowerPoint and a PDF, and then you can grab it from there. But just to start with, yeah, if you want to screen grab any of these, basically 1 and 2 are success, the tone level, the pessimist at the color level, reactive at the line level. 3 and 4 are respect, the realist, and the opportunist. And 5 and 6 are feeling, the optimist, and initiating. And it is interesting to see what those have to do with each other. So yeah, I'll just make sure this is in our shared Google Drive. And of course, if you have any issue accessing it, just email me or post in the Telegram group, and I'll be happy to share the link. We're just about the top of the hour. Let's see if we have any last yeah, success tones. Yeah, that's true, Rachel. She loves success people so much. They're hardcore assholes, but she loves them. Yeah. Success tone for the 2027 win. Well, theoretically, the right variable has something to do in this future we're coming to. We're moving from a first line global cycle theme to a sixth line global cycle theme. I wonder if that means we're moving from a time of high reactivity to a time of stoicness. It's an interesting idea. Rachel says, Alok just initiates when people hear his awesome voice and words. Yeah. I love getting voice memos from him. He'll say, Jonah, I have been thinking and I want to tell you if I appreciate what you have been saying about it. It's so great. I love the way, I mean, I have an undefined throat, so I love doing impressions. Orbel, tickets available for HTHT. Yes, that is right. If you can hop on a plane, I have a ticket for you. So let's talk about this after. And yeah, absolutely. I know that it's kind of short notice, but you know, if there's a way you can come, it starts Wednesday, and let's chat about it after class. Rachel asks, have you ever met Steve Rhodes? And is he ever talking about his work? No, he loves being online. He has the high resilience personality, sixth color, but he's first color design. So he talks about being very limiting about who he lets in aura. He doesn't even let a lot of photos of himself go online. He really keeps himself quite private. But I do think he was commenting on my YouTube videos because there was a commenter whose name was Other One, like OTHER number 1. And Other One sounds like an alternate account for somebody. Like he signed out of his normal account, it signed in with Other One. And he would say, you know, I don't think you're really capturing what Steve meant. I think what Steve really meant in this case was blah, blah, blah. And he will comment extensively, like as if he knows Steve really well from account Other One. I'm assuming it's him. Until I learn otherwise, I'm going to assume that's him. Steph says, thank you. Well, thank you so much, Steph. And Rachel says, thank you. It's been an amazing class. Really appreciate it. And okay, yeah, lots of love, lots of laughs. All right, let's wrap up for today, and I will follow up with you after class, Orbel. If you want to stay on for a moment and chat, that would be great. So thank you all for attending today.